Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Way I Work. This is a series of podcasts that's brought to you by Rigby. We're a staffing and IT services company based in Zurich. If you or anyone you know of is looking for a role in Switzerland, let us know. The best way to do that is by going to rigby.ch/apply and filling out the form, and we'll let you know as soon as we have anything that might be suitable for you. We'd be happy to help. As well as Rigby, this series is brought to you by Studio Hub, which is a video, photo, and editing studio in downtown Zurich. If you would like to record a podcast for your company, record video or audio, let the team at Studio Hub know. You can find them at studiohub.ch. All right, today on The Way I Work, I'm joined by Grant Williams. Grant is someone who's not only spent more than 3 decades navigating the peaks and pitfalls of global finance, but he's also built one of the most respected voices in the industry through a rare combination of insight, storytelling, and relentless curiosity. Grant is an investor, interviewer, speaker, broadcaster, and the author of the widely read financial newsletter, Things That Make You Go, hmm. Over the course of 30 plus years, he's lived and worked in several major financial centers, from London and Tokyo to New York and Sydney, giving him a front row seat to the world's most pivotal economic moments in that time and a global perspective that few can match. He's contributed hugely, perhaps more than anyone, to the opening up of thoughtful conversations about finance and investing to a much broader audience. And through his documentaries, presentations, and signature essays, whether it's on precious metals, monetary policy, or market madness, Grant has made a career of distilling complexity into clarity and doing it with style. But today, we're not just here to talk markets, we're here to talk work. How Grant structures his days, how he manages creativity while constantly on the move, what tools and habits he leans on, and how decades of travel have shaped his thinking and routines. We'll also look ahead, how he's approaching the future, and what keeps him sharp in a world that never stops shifting. Let's dive in. So, Grant, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to speak with you.
Daniel, thank you for being so patient. We've been trying to do this for ages, and 100% my fault. It just kept slipping through the cracks. So we're here, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
Brilliant, thank you. So, now, Grant, so I've been following you for a while, and I think I heard you say once that it was through a friend of the family that your interest in markets was first sparked back in the 80s. Would you say that that was kind of a sliding doors moment that set you on the path that you took, or do you suspect that you would have followed a similar path anyway?
It's a great question, Daniel. I don't know, to be honest with you. It wasn't as though I remember having, apart from wanting to play football for England, I don't
Yeah.
think I had any other a great desire to do anything particular at that age. So,
Hmm.
in some ways it was a sliding door moment because it set me on that kind of path. But in others, it was just a kind of cute thing that happened to me and made me
Yeah.
go, oh, that's interesting. So I don't know. It's a really good question. I think there were other sliding doors moments in my career that I can see took me down one path as opposed to another.
Hmm.
But that one, I feel, just kind of set me on a path that I've been on randomly ever since.
Okay. And you seem to be constantly on the road. Given how much you travel, how do you maintain any sort of routine and or have you learned to thrive without a routine?
Thrive's a bit strong. I've learned to survive without a routine. It's funny. The older I get, the more I crave that routine, and I'm trying to be better at creating a routine. It's been really difficult these last, well, really 10, 12 years. I've been constantly on the road. I
Hmm.
mean, living out of the same suitcase for months at a time, and that's been difficult. It didn't feel difficult at the time because you just get on with it. I'm
Hmm.
of that generation where you just get on with it, and if you wake up feeling ill or sick or whatever,
Yeah.
you've got a plane to catch, so you just get on with it. So I definitely think a routine is something I need, and I'm working hard to kind of create one. It's a work in progress at the moment, but
Yeah.
I'm definitely taking steps to try and do it.
Hmm. And do you have a typical work day? Maybe now? Or does it vary a lot?
I don't really have a typical work day. I work every day. I don't have kind of days off, but the work will be consistent. I wake up in the morning, I'll see what's gone on in the world. I do a lot of reading, which I consider part of my working. I read an awful lot, so
Hmm.
that for me is part of what I consider work. and I'll either be recording a podcast or I'll be thinking about what I'm going to write for the next month, or making notes, or researching, or doing something. So uh, it's very rare a day goes by when I do no work, but
Hmm.
I don't sit down and you know turn everything off from 8 in the morning till noon, and then 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. And have a structured day like that.
Right.
I've become pretty good at knowing that when I have to work, I have to work, and so
Hmm.
everything else needs to take second place. So it's good. It works for me. I I struggled at the beginning of kind of working for myself, working from home,
Yeah.
with finding a way to do that and make sure that I worked. I toyed with the idea of getting an office,
Hmm.
just so I had to get up and go somewhere to
Right.
work. But I'm fortunate that my mindset is such that I've got a desk in my living room, and I just sit at it and I can work, and it's not a problem. As long as I've got
That
some
works for
music in the
you.
background,
Yeah.
I can sit for hours and work.
And are there any kind of tools, digital or analog, that are essential for you?
I mean, look, I'm talking to you through a microphone and with some
Yep.
headphones on, so I need those
More
for
and
the
more.
podcast.
Hmm.
I need my office is my computer or my laptop, depending on where I am,
Yep.
and I don't really need much more than that. I just it's a fantastic position to be in, needing very little to work, and as long as I've got internet, I can work from pretty much anywhere.
Hmm. Does it sometimes spill into weekends, Grant? And if so, are you okay with that?
Look, it spins into every weekend, and
Yeah.
I think when you work for yourself, you have
Yeah.
to be okay with it.
Yep.
That's look. But at the same time, I could say I'm not working this weekend if I wanted to.
Right.
The choice is mine.
Or a Wednesday
Um,
afternoon.
yeah, exactly. But I know when I have to work, and so I work. And sometimes I'll be up, if I'm writing, and I'm on a deadline. I'll sit up and write till 3, 4 in the morning, if
Hmm.
I'm in the flow, and it's all coming
Yeah.
together. And then I'll go to bed, and I'll wake up at 6, and I'll get back and do it again. And there'll be other times when I might wake up in the morning. I mean, I try after I publish on a Sunday. After I publish my note on a Sunday, I try and schedule very little for the Monday, so I have
Yeah.
one quasi day off a week. But it really, rarely ever happens that I do nothing on a Monday.
Yeah, a chance to recover a little bit. I think you've addressed this already, partly at least. But in a corporate setting, there are usually kind of systems and teams in place to ensure accountability and follow through. When you're working independently, when you're working for yourself, you don't have those built-in checks and balances. So, yeah, are there any routines or structures that you've developed to keep yourself accountable, keep yourself on the straight and narrow?
Well, it's a great question. One I've never really given any thought to. I am absolutely accountable to myself. And I kind of like it that way. I know if I've not put enough effort in. I know if I'm not working when I should, and it's that self accountability that
Yeah.
makes you say, look, come on, you need to. I know you want to go and watch the football, or I know you want to go down the pub with your mates, but you need to get some work done.
Mm.
And fine, if you want to go to the football, but you're going to be up until 2 o'clock in the morning to
Yeah.
make up for the time you're giving up. So I think if you have a decent work ethic, and you have a dedication to what it is you do, and you take pride in what you do, so especially when it's the kind of output that I do, which is going to be consumed by other people.
Yeah.
If you have pride in that, you're always going to make sure that what you put out is your best effort. And so, yeah, I've never found myself ever having to try and give myself a talking to in the mirror and say, look, you're not working hard enough. If
Hmm.
anything, I probably work too much and spend too much time working,
Yeah.
and not enough time on the kind of on the other half of the work-life balance, if I'm honest.
Yeah, no, same here. We've been subscribers to things that make you go, since the beginning, since you launched it. And it's known for kind of weaving history and markets and storytelling together. So, do you have a certain process that you follow when you're developing a new piece?
Not really, not really. I over the last, I first started publishing in 2009, I think it was. So almost 17 years now. I've been fortunate in that I've managed to cultivate the ability to write about anything that's interesting to me. I
Hmm.
don't have to find something to write
Yeah.
about the bond market every week, where a load of people do, or the equity market, or whatever their speciality is.
Hmm.
And if you have that luxury, there's always something that's interesting. There's always something. And
Hmm.
so my process, as it is things will occur to me when I just published my most recent letter last Sunday. So I've got a month now until my next one.
Right.
And I've already read a couple of articles, seen a couple of things that I've kind of put in my little folder for next month as things that I might want to explore and write about. Um, once I know the subject that I'm going to write about, once I've decided on that, and I will generally decide on that, yeah, anytime between 2 weeks and a week before I actually sit down to write, which will be the week leading up to publication. The first thing I look for is a title. I try and find a title for the piece because I think once I've got a title,
Mm.
uh, it just, I don't know, but it just, for me personally, it helps me with a flow.
Yeah.
It gives me a sense of what I'm writing about and the tone I want to create, because I try to be probably too cute with some of my titles. So that's my first thing is I won't start writing until I know what the piece is going to be called.
Mm.
And then once I do, I'll sit down and I'll have a vague outline, but I don't like to have a rigid outline structure because I think that leaves little room for kind of exploration in between the
Yeah.
topics you want to cover. And what I find works better for me is I go off on an exploration. I want to dig into a certain topic. I have a sense of why I want to talk about it and what I want to talk about, but I let my research guide me. And so I might go down one road and then find myself off on a tangent for another part that I found interesting and perhaps germane to the subject I'm talking about. And then it's a case of, how do you bring it back to
Mm.
the original ethos behind the piece you started to write? But it's fun. I've tried other ways of working. I've tried, people have suggested you should try this, try that. I've tried all kinds of different ways, and this is the one that over time definitely works best for me.
Okay. And here's one. With the rise of AI, are you experimenting with that in your research or writing processes at all? Or are you more?
Yeah, obviously, look, I have, because people have told me I have to.
Yeah.
I've played around with it.
Mm.
I've found it to be a useful tool in helping with some of the research. If I
Yeah.
want to know something a little better or dig into something, it's been a good starting point
That's it.
for that. I've used it as a kind of inline proofreader to make suggestions as to how to improve some of the paragraphs. So, if I'm writing a
Mm.
few paragraphs about something it doesn't quite feel like I've landed what I'm trying to say,
Yep.
I would run it through AI. But generally speaking, 99 times out of 100, what I get back it just doesn't feel or sound right. It's not my
Yeah.
voice. It's not the way I would
No.
approach something. So for me, I have not found it particularly useful. I certainly can't say that I would use it to write, because there's no way it's going to write the same way. There's no way it's going to approach the subjects the
Hmm.
way I approach them. And so, I use it as a fairly blunt tool,
Yeah.
um, and no more really.
All right. You've got such an engaging interview style, and you've interviewed some of the most thoughtful people in investing. Are there any interviews or guests that really had a lasting impact on how you approach your own work?
Oh my God, so many,
Yeah.
so many. I mean, I would think with my work on my own and my work at Real Vision, I've done well over 500 interviews now, probably
Hmm.
close to 700, I would think. And it's trite to say I've learned something from each one, but I've learned, in terms of your
Yeah.
question, I mean, I've definitely learned something from each one, whether from an
Hmm.
informational perspective. But no, I think so many people have taught me things, both about myself in terms of what works when you're trying to get information out of people or trying to engage with people. There are things that work and things that don't. But at the same time, everybody's different. So
Yeah.
you sit in a chair with oftentimes a complete stranger, and you have to find a way to build a rapport with them instantly.
Hmm.
And I'd love to say I could give you three or four tricks to do that, but I don't know what
Yeah.
they are. I really
Right.
don't. I've found that process to be something that I am equipped to do,
Hmm.
but it's not like I go through a mental checklist I,
Yeah.
I think the one thing I would say, which is a which is I don't know whether it's a cheat code or I don't know what it is, but genuine curiosity
Yes.
about the subject and the person,
Yeah.
there's no substitute for that.
No.
There's none. You can't fake it. I think
Yeah.
if you really are curious about that person or the subject you're talking about or the information they have, that goes a long way
Yeah.
to getting the best kind of responses that are possible.
Yeah, for sure. And the world today is as noisy and as uncertain as ever, maybe more so. Is there anything that's giving you reason to be optimistic at the moment, either in markets or technology or something else?
Well, I think you this is it's interesting because this is the first time in my life where there's a reason to be pessimistic about technology. Technology
Mm.
is an incredibly optimistic thing.
Yeah, it's a
Technology
good
has
point.
been the source of all human progress. This is the first time in my lifetime
Yeah,
that I feel reasons to be pessimistic about technology. And my reasons are no different to most people's reasons. Social media is
cesspool.
a quickly growing cancer
Mm.
in society, but there's no reversing it. VAR is another one. We were talking about football before we
Yeah,
started
VAR.
recording, and VAR is another one. But seriously, there are plenty of parts of the technological piece of our lives today that I am actually pessimistic on, not from a progress perspective, but from the perspective of the effect that it's having on individuals and the collective. But I think the reason to be optimistic is the same reason that there was reason to be optimistic at the depths of World War II or the depths of World War
Mm.
One, is that history will tell you that we will get through this
Yeah,
and we will figure out the problems and society will progress and it will fix the things that are wrong. It may take time, and right now there's so much chaos that it feels, days feel like weeks. Um, but every time mankind has been challenged in the ways we're being challenged now societally, we've worked our way through them. It's not always been pretty. It's often taken longer than one would hope, and it's often involved conflict of some sort.
hmm,
But on the other side of that is peace and prosperity and increasing um, increasing benefits for society. We just have to get from here to there. And if you're unlucky enough to be around during one of those periods, then that's just the luck of the draw. If you were born in the immediate aftermath of World War II and you died in 2019, which is a human life, you lived through arguably the best period of human history.
yep. Hmm.
Um, get those dates slightly wrong, and depending on your age, you're going to have to go through some turmoil. That's just the luck of the draw.
Yeah. Ron, have you ever been curious about how someone else approaches their work, their routines, how they make decisions, how they organize their time? And if so, would you most like to hear it in an interview like this one?
Uh, yeah, look, there are plenty of people I'm curious about their process. So I think anybody whose work you admire, you're always curious about how they do what they do. How much of it is a natural gift, how much of it is just hard work and repetition. How do they manage to do the things they do? I think I have that again, that curiosity. There's that word again about so many people whose work I follow. And I've been fortunate enough to sit and talk with many of them about that.
Yeah.
My great friend Remy Tito, who's the man behind the Mad King and now the Citadel.
Hmm.
He is an absolute workhorse. His work ethic is extraordinary, and what he gets done in the time when he's working just blows my mind over and over and over and over again. I
Hmm.
can't work the way he does. He works flat out
Mm.
for days and days and days and days on end, like a mad scientist in a lab, and he loves it. He's got
Yeah.
such a passion for it, and the results show. So I've been spending a lot of time um, working with Remy in recent months, and he's an extraordinary guy, and his process I find fascinating, as
Yeah.
would you and your viewers if you talk to him.
Okay, perhaps we'll reach out to him. He was behind the camera in the early days in Real Vision, wasn't he?
No, he wasn't behind the camera. He built the platform.
Hmm.
He built the website, built the platform, and he was in charge of all the technological side of the
Hmm.
platform. And yeah, I just a fantastic guy, fantastic guy.
Well, Grant, once again, thank you for joining us. It's been really interesting to speak with you.
Daniel, it's my great pleasure, and I'm sorry again it's taken so long for us to get this together. I'm glad we figured it out in the end.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Grant.
Cheers, bye bye.
All right. All right, that was another episode of The Way I Work. Thank you for listening. This is brought to you by Rigby. We're a staffing company in Switzerland and in Singapore. If you are looking to hire either in Switzerland or Singapore or to be hired, let us know. The best way to do that is by going to rigby.ch/apply and filling out the form, and then we'll be in touch as soon as we have something that might match to you. Thank you.